We're going to talk about the journey to the cloud. And again, I'm Terrell. I run our public cloud practices ahead. That really means managing partnerships with Amazon and Azure. So when we talk about enterprise cloud adoption, we're saying, look, you're in the data center, you're on premises, you have some solution today running your enterprise IT, and you're thinking about moving to the public cloud. Again, Amazon, Azure, or the like. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about the context, get an understanding of how that model is different, and go through the journey of putting production workloads in practice, monitoring and optimizing, and maturing in the cloud. So IT landscape's always changing. Over the last few years, last 10 years or more, there's been a heavy focus on outsourcing, heavy focus on software as a service, platform as a service. You see Salesforce.com, not really anybody does too much internal CRM anymore. So they've kind of owned that market, and companies like them, as well as other services and platforms like Box and Office 365 and Amazon's Workspaces. In application development, there's been a tremendous change, especially from a methodology perspective. So Scrum and Agile and iterative development and release processes have come into play. But those have lots of dependencies on capabilities of IT operations. And there's still limits there in being able to achieve that nirvana of, hey, I built something today, I can deploy that today. Gene Kim touched on it a lot. Eric Kaplan touched on it a lot this morning. But we are also seeing infrastructure as a service maturity. And really, the major players here have come a long way from their security capabilities, their software tools, their platform as a service tools, their authentication, authorization capabilities, key vaults, especially maturing in the configuration management space, so SaltStack, Puppet Labs, Chef, Ansible, those types of things. So we're seeing a lot there. So, with all this change, traditionally we've looked at our private infrastructure model, and again, we have a step function in terms of our decisions and capabilities, with some play in there. So you kind of see this picture of, hey, I buy capacity in chunks, right? And what Gene Kim talked about a little bit is that you have this lead time. So if the business changes rapidly, or if your users change rapidly, your capacity, or say you have a spike event like Black Friday for retail, you're either over-provisioned or you're unable to meet demand in some cases. And so this is a big issue for seasonal businesses that spike during certain times of year, like retail. In the public or hybrid infrastructure capability, you do have to provision that base capability, right? So you're always going to have a certain set of infrastructure running, but the idea is that you're able to expand that capacity more in line with what your customer or workload demand is. And so, the idea is that you're able to meet those and spikes in demand and satisfy those. So, okay, we're doing this. We understand that there's all these new capabilities. The gist of this is that it's just not the same model. And so there's a different way to deploy, manage, secure, et cetera. And so, one of these ways of change is that we've gone from where most people are right now, which is, hey, I manage bare metal or I manage virtualization. We still have customers saying, I have an application and I need 8 vCPU and I need, 32 gig RAM and all that kind of stuff. The future is moving towards events, services, and SLA based. And so this kind of decouples that request for CPU, I/O, and storage to, hey, I just have this many events that I need to process. I can provision in real time because I have all the tools and capabilities there. And this seems like magic, and Gene Kim talked about it a little bit earlier about the unicorns. But this is kind of where the industry is going. And so the public cloud has starting to enable more maturity in this space. Again, going back to agility, the value here and why you would want to go this is really going back to the business. And in order to be agile, you have to be consistent. You have to have repeatable processes. A good practice is to centralize public and private hybrid account management and governance. There should be one process to rule them all, really. Different tools, but one process. There's also architecture impacts for agility. Scaling individual components of the architecture. So we've heard the term monolith, we've heard the term microservices. Elasticity of demand is great. Elasticity of servers is great. But if you are, scaling everything together when you don't need to, that's a bad thing. One of the other key pieces here and kind of the new, this enabling this agility is in the public cloud, you can run your servers in a very different way than you run them today. So, think of it like a rental car. I'm driving down the highway, I'm running out of gas, and all of a sudden a new car appears, I step out and get in the new one, and I keep going. That's kind of the idea here, is that car or that thing, that server, that VM isn't that special because I have another one to take its place. Going a little bit into the capabilities. So again, I mentioned AWS and Azure. AWS has a ton of services, building on their global infrastructure, their availability. They have plenty of SaaS and PaaS-based offerings above and beyond just storage and compute. Azure, this is kind of the Azure landscape. Different model, more focused on the hybrid play, but still a ton of stuff there. A little bit of an eye chart here, but this is available to look at after. So, okay, now we understand the new model, and we want to start practicing this. We want to go on our journey, right? We need to start the planning, and it starts with the business. So this is an example of an integration adoption roadmap from AWS for an AWS integration. But really, if you go from left to right, it starts with the cloud business case. It doesn't start with, say, hey, get my application out there and do my portfolio analysis. There's lots of business, organizational, people, process, tooling decisions that need to be made, and there's still a lot of that enterprise architecture capability there that needs to be practiced. So look at your business, look at your methodology. What do you do that no one else does? And I say that this will either push you to the cloud or push you away from it because things like compliance and security, PCI things, PII, healthcare, all of that stuff, that could impact your decisions here. So it does need to be evaluated. It does need to be rationalized. Look at your application portfolio. Not all your applications scale the same way. They're not all built the same way. So some applications may be better capable to move or migrate to the cloud than others. Look at your methodology. What I've talked to clients about for a long time is that, great, you release code every 2 weeks. It takes you 2 weeks to test, 3 months to test, whatever. What good is it to get product every 2 weeks if I can't use it? The same thing with infrastructure. If I can't put it anywhere, what good is that to me? So if I have those demands right now from my application development cycle and automation of tests and all of that, then that's going to push me to the cloud. So that's what I really need to think about. You can look at on-demand and all that. There's other things that are great fits for the cloud, like what do you do that everyone else does? What's a common business process? This is a great thing to look at SaaS or look at other platform as a service because it's saying, yes, I'm choosing a platform and I might be tied to that, but it's not core to my product or my business. And so, performance, scalability, durability, data pipelining, big data capabilities, things that are point-in-time scalability. These are great candidates for the cloud. The next step is kind of setting up your governance and scaffolding. Governance model is key. You're still going to have a hybrid environment. You need to understand how you're going to handle this going forward. So how do I manage my on-premises solutions? How do I manage my cloud solutions? But still the process, people, tooling needs to fit that. I need to have a model that says, okay, I can go from pieces of the process to the other, and that's blessed, and it's a hardened, known thing. Same with security model. Also the network. So again, Amazon, Microsoft have great capabilities from VPC and VNet. You can manage it like it's your network, if it's your IP addresses, all of that. You don't have to have public IPs. Then look at organizational change processes, including retooling. You might not have the skills. You may have atrophied because you may have outsourced some of this. So you may have to look at rehiring. And then begin those long-term architecture discussions. So again, the state of IT constantly changes, and you need to have a long-term view of that you revisit periodically. And then this is really important, set up cost management, some methodology to say, I know what's running somewhere, I have instances tagged, I have things or processes that run in the background that kill instances that aren't tagged to a cost center, something like that. So you really need to know what you're running. And then, so get your hands dirty. Practice on your business. Great way to do this is to start on a new product, right? With a new product, you don't have to bring with you, all of the old mindset or things that you've done for 20 years or, beyond, right? You can start with a fresh mindset. You can build the scaffolding the way that you want it, tailored to your products, but in a kind of a cloud way. Go through the trial and error process. Throw away what doesn't work. Again, you're not paying for it for 3 years. You're paying for it by the hour, by the minute, by some short unit of time. And once you've learned from this, harden that process, repeat it, and build it into your enterprise architecture, build it into your framework. Another thing that's very practical here is shift the legacy workload. Focus on something that represents your stack. Something very common to you that you know very well, know how it operates, know the ins and outs of it, and then try to run that on a public cloud and start monitoring what changes and what runs differently. Again, we talked before about mean time to recover versus mean time to failure, mean time between failures. It's kind of the same business SLA, but it's a very different thing. And I always recommend running application and database performance monitoring. Find out where your bottlenecks are. You may not be seeing bottlenecks in your current network because you have X amount of capacity or you might be over provisioned. But then when you bring that down to the right size level, you may find that certain pieces of that stack don't operate the way they should. So here's a view of kind of several steps in the process, some associated savings, and then a level of maturity required to achieve that, right? So say I migrate instances to the cloud. This is often referred to as lift and shift. People have another word for the shift. If it doesn't require much from a maturity perspective, and you're probably not going to save a lot of money, but that's a start. And then you can reduce your underutilized capacity. You can say, okay, I've over-provisioned VMs in my data center. Now I'm in the public cloud. Let me right-size those. Again, some savings there, not a lot of maturity. Focus on automation. We heard this earlier from Gene Kim, say it again and again. Automation is an enabler. It in and of itself isn't going to save you money, it may, but it does require some maturity. It's really a prerequisite. So is monitoring, right? So great tools like App Dynamics out there can self-document, can show you what's in your network, can show you long-running SQL processes, long-running queries, just the way that your application works that you may not know. And that all that information allows you to then look at your applications, take your automation and that performance monitoring capability, and then start looking at auto-scaling. So, hey, I want my application to automatically respond to business or load events. And again, that's where you're going to start seeing savings. So again, scaling up and scaling down, and that elasticity is a core tenet of a public cloud. It does require some maturity though. So again, this is a journey. One of the other things I mentioned this before is cost optimization. Amazon has reserve capacity. You reserve instances. You can trade them in, sell them, swap them out. But that allows you to bring costs down. Microsoft has the kind of a commitment plan capability, so it's more about, hey, spend this much a year and we'll give you discounts. But again, if you understand your workloads, you can make those decisions, and that's where you're going to see more substantial savings and mature as an organization. And then the last two are really kind of more future capabilities, although they're permeating a lot of startups, and they're really gaining hold in a lot of new product development, and that's stateless microservices architecture and focus on event-driven applications, right? So, and Amazon has been saying for years that state is the enemy of elasticity, and shared state has always been something that we've been concerned about with managing applications. It's always a limitation. If it can be avoided, that's great. Again, Gene Kim talked about microservices. That's core here. So I scale one thing, or I have demand in one area. I don't have to scale everything together. Also, easier, smaller deployments, easier to pinpoint where my problems are. So that's kind of the path that you want to look at. We talked a little bit about optimization. Again, run the optimization software. There's tools out there. AppDynamics is great. New Relic's great. We're looking at Ruxit and some others. Do that one time. Ongoing is really valuable to show you baselines. Snapshot your VMs, back them up, and then you can delete them. Delete the ones that are out there running and see who complains, right? So Chaos Monkey was mentioned. There's also these things called Reapers. And this is great for going through and killing VMs or killing instances that just aren't adding any value to the business, no one's using, but no one said shut them off, right? So this is great for billing cost and audit management, and it's great for helping in configuration and auto-scaling. Again, going back to the earlier slide, the cloud provides you opportunities to be agile, to be flexible. You've got lots of chances to get it right. So failure isn't like a 3-year thing, it's a one-day thing. And you can recover from it. It also, allows for, alignment with agile and iterative processes, and really supports a lot of what we heard earlier. And we get that flexibility to respond to new models and new features. If you rewound to, the dot-com bubble in late 90s, early 2000s, there might have been a few of those companies that survived had they had a cloud and not had to spend all their money, up front going into building out their data center. We talked about the maturation process, what success looks like. This is a little bit more of the same. You see the lift and shift strategy. It gives you some value. But as you move to a more mature, platform and architecture, you don't need as much running all the time because you have the capability through automation and monitoring to respond to events. And once you have that security and feeling, then you can say, okay, I'm going to run this server at a much higher utilization. Now, when I frequently launch and terminate instances, that does have a storage impact. So you do need to pay attention to, hey, I may have a server that's ephemeral. If it gets terminated, I lose that data. I need to have a strategy to back that up. Gene Kim talked about Netflix and EC2 when they had a minor outage. Again, backing things up across availability zones, across data centers, across regions, that lets you survive those events and recover in minutes, if not shorter time frame. Again, all of this assumes that automation and tooling and instrumentation is there. You need to mature that area. This is going to bring up your utilization per admin, right? Your admin's going from the bare metal days through VM, where 10 servers to 100 servers to now hundreds of servers or VMs that can be managed. So we'll talk to this, lift and shift, resize and tune your environments, monitor, analyze, understand what you're doing, focus on automation, and then re-architect, rebuild, and look at ways to better run your platform. So we can help you with this. This isn't, you're not out there alone. We have an offering that allows training, dev test, migration. Again, our journey we call Getting Ahead in the Cloud. We can help you with that. We can help with executive boot camps, engineer boot camps. Our traditional strategy, roadmap, design, plan, migrate, or deploy and manage, and then some managed services.